This is Joseph Phillips. In this presentation, we're going to examine some elicitation techniques. The first and most common elicitation technique is brainstorming. Now, brainstorming actually has two parts. First is idea generation, where you are trying to generate or create ideas where anything goes. And then you have idea reduction, where you begin to filter ideas that aren't really valid or aren't really practical or applicable to the scope and requirements that you're trying to generate. Now, a data dictionary and a glossary are two components that you'll want to create. A data dictionary is really a technical data definition for your primitive data elements and your composite data elements. Now, the glossary really defines these in a more technical term that it defines what the terms are and it puts them in a very common nomenclature. Your focus groups, this is an intense group that is a pre-qualified group of stakeholders. It's usually led by a modifier, and it's qualitative research. It helps you to generate some ideas and attitudes about the requirements. Now, a focus group, it's a good idea to do, but usually you're doing this with your end users and you're doing this with your customers. Now, interface analysis is an approach that you see how the solution you're creating actually works with everything else that you use. So you can imagine if you were adding a new type of server like a Microsoft SharePoint server, how would that interface with your network, your hardware, existing software, even the work processes to interact with that particular server? And then what about existing equipment? So you look for compatibility. It's how that that component interacts with everything else. Interviews are a good way to elicit requirements because you are working face-to-face with the customer or your stakeholders, and it's generally a friendly conversational approach. Now, you could have a structured interview or an unstructured. Structured means you just go loaded with questions. Unstructured is more conversational, where you don't go in so prepared with a preset of questions. You have some general things you want to find out, but you don't have to go in with 20 specific questions to ask, for example. Now, interviews could be one-to-one or one-to-many, depending on the situation. One-to-one is generally more ideal for the unstructured. Where you have many, you want more structured because it helps to keep the group focused on the set of requirements and the set of questions. Observation is a great way to elicit requirements. You can do passive observation or active. Passive observation, sometimes called just shadowing, would be you would go and follow this chemist around, and you wouldn't interact with her, you wouldn't ask her questions, you would just observe the work she's doing. Now, active observation means that you would do the opposite, that you would still follow her around, but you would actually ask her questions and pause her and want to know why she's doing things a particular way. And in some instances, you may actually participate in the work to better understand how your requirements would affect the individual. Now, prototypes are a great way to help model a solution. And there are generally two types of prototypes. You have throwaway, where you might make a mock-up of the software interface and it really doesn't contribute to the end result, or a usage prototype, where the prototype you create actually becomes part of the solution. A requirements workshop is a very structured, intense meeting to focus on just the requirements. You bring in your key stakeholders and you do 4 activities. You're going to identify requirements, you build the scope, you define the requirements in that scope, and then you prioritize those requirements. So this can sometimes be a lengthy meeting, so you want to go in with a very structured approach, know exactly what you have to get done to save time and to keep the stakeholders focused. Now, surveys and questionnaires, these are a way to elicit requirements, but they aren't always very reliable. It's just a fast way to basically touch a lot of users and to find out what their concerns and input may be on the requirements. So while it's not always reliable, it's fast.